This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Pro-government troops say they have ended the siege on the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Countries within Africa struggle to ease restrictions amid rising cases of COVID-19. Kenya's ban on single-use plastic bottles comes into effect as World Environment Day is marked. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. Egypt rolls out plans to reopen its economy amid rising COVID-19 cases. And in your sport news, veteran South African midfielder Dean Furman bids farewell to domestic football. We begin in Libya, where the UN-recognized government of national accord, led by Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj, says it has regained total control of the capital, Tripoli. This follows a battle that lasted for 14 months with troops allied to Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar. Prime Minister al-Sarraj is currently on a state visit to Turkey, where he's been holding talks with his key ally, President Tayyip Erdogan. However, the Libyan premier says the battle for Tripoli will only end after Khalifa Haftar's forces have been defeated.
I have stressed to His Excellency the President, and I had promised our people from day one, our battle is not over and we are determined to defeat our enemy, for the state to take control of the entire nation and for the eradication of all those who threaten our democratic free state.
Government fighters have been celebrating the recapture of Tripoli. Forces allied with the UN-supported government have also captured a key airport in Tripoli. The fall of Tripoli International Airport came 2 days after the UN announced that Libya's warring parties had agreed to resume ceasefire talks following weeks of heavy fighting. Since 2015, Libya has been divided between two governments, one in the east and one in the west.
With that said, on this blessed day, and over a year since the treacherous assault on us from terrorist militias and those who support them, I announce to you the liberation of the capital Tripoli and its outskirts just hours ago. I would like to address the countries that have supported this aggression and that have contributed to the killing of Libyans and the destruction of the country. You lost your bet, and we will take you to court. And here you have just tasted defeat at the gates of Tripoli.
Let's move to South Africa now, where on Tuesday, its High Court made a ruling against some of the country's lockdown measures. The government is now saying it will appeal the court's ruling. The court had ruled that some of the lockdown measures were unconstitutional and invalid. It ordered that the rules be reviewed and amended while giving consideration to their impact on individual rights. However, it suspended its ruling for 14 days. That means that the measures it deemed unconstitutional still remain in place. We'll move on to Senegal now, where protests continue against a nationwide curfew imposed to curb the spread of COVID-19. The time the demonstrators took to the holy city of Touba to air their frustrations, CGTN's Jen Keo has the details.
The Senegalese city of Touba was the epicenter of the country's current COVID-19 outbreak. It's now the center of protests against the current curfew imposed to help curb the spread of the virus. Many here are frustrated as lockdown measures have hampered their ability to earn a living.
It's because of the pandemic. For the past 3 months, the president has closed the borders and banned all transport inside the country. No one goes anywhere. We are stuck day and night, but we are fathers and we have to feed our children. Drivers have come to a point where they can't take it anymore. Parking their vehicles, they protested to say this situation has been going on for too long and it's too difficult.
Similar protests also took place in the country's capital, Dakar. Police have arrested over 70 people in the capital.
This is certainly the consequence of the state of emergency and the COVID-19 lockdown. I think the youngsters had the opportunity to express themselves.
Demonstrators damaged several buildings and other property in their latest protests. Jin Keo, CGTN.
Security checkpoints have been beefed up and more people are being turned back in Zimbabwe following a sharp rise in the number of new COVID-19 cases in the last week of May. CGTN's Farai Makutuya reports.
Authorities say the country is still in lockdown level 2, but under stricter enforcement, which means only those who need to are allowed to leave their homes.
And I'm actually urging the populace, the people in this country, that your behavior towards COVID-19 shouldn't be characterized by the complacence and fear of the law, rather fear of the COVID-19, to know that we have to stay at home. Yes, it's critical that sector or the industry has got to work, economy has to move at the same time. Only those essential services, and it is up to you to prove to the police that you are an essential service.
Restrictions had been relaxed following distress calls from informal traders who wanted to return to work to feed families left vulnerable by weeks of inactivity.
What is the reason why people are now moving around? It is about the socio-economic challenges we are having. So it means there's hunger in those homes. There were promises for support, which many people have not received.
Zimbabwe had not seen more than 5 new cases per day since the pandemic broke out, but it registered 76 new infections in one single day on May the 28th. There have been double-digit rises on several days since then, most of them amongst thousands of returning residents who have been placed under 21-day mandatory quarantine.
The real areas of great worry right now, they are the entry points where these people are coming through. Because there are people whom we have read about who have escaped from quarantine centers, and there are people who have come out on some videos which have been circulating around, who are crossing through illegal crossing points. Those are the greatest threat, not the person who is on the street.
Authorities have been urged to scale up security and actively trace the escapees, as well as ramp up testing in the quarantine facilities. Farai Makutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Meanwhile, China has donated protective equipment to Zimbabwe's armed forces. This batch of equipment includes more than 60,000 masks and other critical medical gear. Zimbabwe's Defense Minister, Opa Muchinguri, has highly praised China for helping Zimbabwe in the fight against COVID-19. Muchinguri says Zimbabwe has always appreciated the strategic relationship with China and feels humbled by China's timely assistance on the fight against the pandemic. Chinese ambassador to Zimbabwe, Guo Xiaosheng, says the COVID-19 pandemic has helped solidify the relationship between China and Zimbabwe.
We feel greatly humbled by China's timely assistance, more so the selflessness this great nation demonstrated to the whole world by assisting even those nations who view China as an adversary. China has led by example by putting the needs of other people first, despite the fact that they too have their own citizens to look after. Indeed, as Zimbabwe, we cherish and value our strategic relationship with the People's Republic of China.
Some say the pandemic has held up a mirror for the truth in our life. I think it has certainly brought into view the rock-solid friendship between China and Zimbabwe. China will forever cherish its traditional friendship with Zimbabwe, and the People's Liberation Army will always be a closest friend and trustworthy partner of Zimbabwe Defense Force. I'm confident together we will sail past this storm and into a shared, bright future.
Facebook and the International Committee of the Red Cross, together with Red Crescent Movement, have launched Africa Together, which is a 2-day show of artists, singers, and comedians to combat misinformation and call for vigilance to curb the spread of COVID-19.
It is a battle for the hearts and souls as governments and partners battle coronavirus. African artists have also taken to social media to push important messages.
Now, music is a powerful vector, an important conduit to spread messages of hope, of solidarity, but crucial messages of prevention as well to our fellow Africans, especially the African youth, who themselves are agents of change in their communities and their societies. This is why we, the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement in Africa, are teaming up with Facebook Africa to bring to you the Africa Together Festival.
As lockdowns and other forms of restrictions continue being relaxed, the risk of misinformation that enables the spread of the disease is too real to ignore.
Since the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, we have seen a massive increase of usage of our platforms, Facebook and Instagram, around the world and in Africa. We have seen the power of these platforms to bring the world closer together. We really want to harness this power to ensure that there is correct information that is being disseminated, that we fight misinformation as much as possible.
The two-day Africa Together Festival will kick off on June 4th and streamed live on Facebook.
Tout c'est pas facile parce que d'être confiné.
It's not easy to be in confinement. It's very, very difficult because we need to support our families and get on with life to survive. So I don't have a lot of words to say to you because there aren't any words. But maybe I can give you a song or songs to give you strength or give you a bit of, how can I say, a bit of peace.
Des chansons pour trouver la force.
Côte d'Ivoire singers Kajim, Nash, TNT, Kape, Geek and Ami, who have previously partnered with the ICRC in the anti-COVID-19 campaigns, are expected to perform amongst other artists from other African nations. Nick Mudimba, CGTN.
Schools in Ghana are beginning to reopen as the government further eases lockdown restrictions. Students have been away from classrooms for more than 2 months now due to the coronavirus pandemic. But some parents fear it's still not safe to send their children back to school, as Ghana has yet to flatten the curve of its infections. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rafai reports from Accra.
Letitia Tano has been taking lessons from home since schools were closed in March due to the coronavirus outbreak. She's watching an education channel created by the state broadcaster to teach students. She says it's been difficult adjusting to this style of learning out of the classroom.
When I was in school like this, if I didn't understand something, I had to consult my teacher so that he would explain it to me. But here, since I can't meet the teacher, I find it very difficult understanding some questions and things they'll be teaching on the television.
The government has further eased lockdown restrictions, which will allow schools to reopen later this month. Only final year high school students like Letitia and those at university will return to classes. But some parents are worried about the further spread of the coronavirus when schools reopen.
The COVID-19 has not left, it's still with us. So as a parent, my concern is how safe my child is. Even though we are going to put the necessary measures in place for the child to go back to school, how safe are they over there?
Since Ghana first eased lockdown in April, the country's infections of the coronavirus have kept increasing. The government says the country has to learn to live with the virus. All schools are to be disinfected before they are reopened. A classroom like this, which usually holds 50 students, will now be limited to 30. This is to allow some level of physical distancing among the students. The government has also tasked head teachers with enforcing the strict wearing of face masks and hand hygiene. Some are calling for all teachers and students to be tested for COVID-19 before they are allowed back in schools.
We need to draw up some criteria. And after that, whoever meets that criteria should be allowed to undergo testing. Because we may not be able to handle all of them undergoing the tests. But if the government or somebody suggests that they should be tested, I think it's a good idea. It would have been much better.
Letitia Tano says she's happy to be going back to school, but she may find it difficult complying with physical distancing when she meets her friends. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
In Uganda, the effects of the coronavirus lockdown measures are hitting urban refugees hard, despite the government lifting some restrictions. Urban refugees in Uganda do not benefit from humanitarian aid, and many struggle to make ends meet. Isabel Nakira has that report.
Nemaya Chidagula is a Congolese refugee who's lived in Uganda for over a decade. He built a small soap-making business, but the coronavirus lockdown has taken away his customers. Now he's going hungry and has come to collect food vouchers for his family.
For sure, it's been hard because we are spending some of the day without getting any food. Maybe even for now we have reduced how to eat. Maybe we don't eat again lunch. Yeah, only in the evening, even morning, it's hard.
This refugee-led organization is supporting those like Nemaya with basic food, medical care and cash handouts. Around 80,000 urban refugees live in Kampala and are allowed to work according to the country's refugee policy. Many of these refugees run small businesses in Kampala, but they've not been able to work during the lockdown. And as the economy opens up, their businesses may not pick up fast enough, making it hard for them to afford basic needs like food and rent. At least 250 refugees are provided with assistance at this agency every day.
What we do is, after assessing and really finding out, okay, they were not able to, then we shall provide them with a voucher. And this voucher allows them to access this food in the shops that provide this food assistance. So they are contracted service providers with whom we deal with.
In Uganda, refugees who live outside settlements are expected to be self-reliant and do not receive humanitarian assistance. Philemon Basereka, a Congolese pastor whose church also supports refugees, says they have been overwhelmed by the demand during the pandemic.
No matter which help that you have, they communicate to each other and say that there is help somewhere. So you can call 10 people and you're going to see 1,000 refugees come and do attend, want you to support.
The government has distributed food to the urban poor, including refugees, but many missed out. The UNHCR has been providing cash assistance during this lockdown, but the agency says it needs an additional $5.1 million to meet their urgent needs for the next 3 months. In the meantime, Nemaya and many other refugees living in Kampala hope life will soon return to the way it was before COVID-19. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break and return. More news making headlines, including Kenya's ban on single-use plastic bottles comes into effect as World Environment Day is marked globally.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
In the U.S., nationwide protests continue for a 10th night following the death of African-American George Floyd at the hands of police in Minneapolis. Demonstrations had largely remained peaceful in recent days after almost a week of nighttime violence from protesters and police. In Washington, D.C., new fencing was installed around the perimeter of the White House, and officials say military troops deployed to the Capitol would return to their base on Thursday night. In Minneapolis, a memorial service was held for George Floyd. Our correspondent Dan Williams tells us how he was remembered.
Truly, emotionally, it was a heartbreakingly sad service, it has to be said, but there were also moments of joy and also real moments of words of inspiration as well. We heard from various family members telling us about the character of George Floyd, who he was, what he stood for. He was a fun-loving guy. He was a person that made other people feel good about themselves. But there were also strong messages as well, messages about justice for George Floyd, but also to use this spotlight as well and bring about lasting change in ending police brutality. And we heard from Philanese Floyd, which is one of George's brothers.
All these people came to see my brother, and that's amazing to me that he touched so many people's hearts, you know, because he's been touching our hearts, you know. I'm just staying strong as I can, because I need to get it out. I need to get it out. Everybody wants justice. We want justice for George. He's going to get it. He's going to get it.
Well, we're also seeing more fallout as well following the events of just over a week ago. Now, the Minneapolis City Council, now they're holding an emergency meeting on Friday where among the things that they are discussing is the future of the Minneapolis Police Department, and there are some City Council members who are talking about dismantling the Minneapolis Police Department, and they include, two of the members that include within that movement to dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department included Jeremiah Ellison. Now, he is the son of Keith Ellison, who is the Minnesota Attorney General. So as I say, further evidence that there are a number of people and leaders around Minneapolis and Minnesota calling for long-term change and justice for George Floyd here.
A ban on single-use plastic bottles takes effect in Kenya on Friday. The new law applies in protected areas like national parks and beaches. This comes 2 years after the country banned the use of plastic bags. But as CGTN's Nick Mudimba reports, many of those who earn a living by collecting, selling, or recycling plastic bottles are a lot worried.
The Nairobi National Park will be among the many protected areas in Kenya to ban single-use plastic bottles. The government gave a one-year notice, and enforcement of the ban will start from 5th June, which also marks the World Environment Day. Kenya's Cabinet Secretary for Tourism and Wildlife, Najib Balala, has asked Kenyans who visit national parks to brace for new rules and regulations.
There will be a big signage in the national parks that you drop your plastic bottle at the gate, you don't enter with it, or otherwise you'll be penalized.
12 kilometers from Kenya's capital city lies the Dandora dumping site. Those who come here make a living from scavenging the waste. It's their main source of income. Most of the waste products here are used plastic bottles. They may be an eyesore to the visiting eye and a danger to the environment, but these used plastic bottles are an economic lifeline for those who collect and sell them to recycling companies.
This ban will affect us. We sell these plastics. I manage to take my kids to school, as well as manage to handle my responsibilities. I also take care of my household. Here, I dress my kids and their mother, and also send some money back home in the village. I'm pleading with the government to enact this slowly. We need to benefit from this waste before the ban reaches us. They shouldn't come with force. The government should also look after us. Coronavirus has made us broke.
It is a dumping site that started all the way back in the 1980s, and right now the lifestyle will be detrimental without the plastic bottles. Recycling companies are also depending on them, with the fact that now they have to sell these bottles to make a living. Most of them have their wives, children working on this dump site. The Cabinet Secretary has regretted the loss of income for those affected by the ban, but says protecting the environment remains the government's top priority.
Yes, we know there are some people depending on this business, but what we are saying is that your plastic bottle is dropped at the gate of the national park. Then there will be a system of collection and going to be recycled. So we are not banning recycle. The recycle business will be there, particularly the PETs. So there will be that business. So that those bottles that are collected at the gate then we are working with partners to collect them back for recycling, but they cannot enter into the protected areas where we cherish a lot.
We meet Joyce Gashugi, Kenya's country manager of Petco Kenya, a firm that recycles plastic bottles.
The ban for us is, we would have wished it wasn't there. But that being said, we are willing to support the government. The reason being, as a producer responsibility organization, Petco is committed to making sure that post-consumer plastic bottles are not lying around or being leaked in the environment.
Currently, due to the coronavirus pandemic, most people use hand sanitizers, which are mostly packed in single-use plastic bottles.
This is a way of life now. People are going to be carrying these containers. And so for us, we see an opportunity to partner with Kenya Wildlife Service and the Kenya Forestry Service to establish areas alongside other partners where these containers can be disposed of without necessarily having them get into the park.
Well, it's baby steps, which we have started in our protected areas, including the beaches and marine areas, but definitely we have seen the negative impact of plastic. But now with new technologies, there is reusable plastics, which is recycled.
The theme for this year's World Environment Day is Celebrate Biodiversity. It is an apt reminder that human beings are part of the global ecosystem and cannot survive in isolation. The ban on single-use plastic bottles is seen by environmentalists as a step in the right direction. Nick Mudimba, CGTN.
To discuss this further, we are joined by Barak Ozuno, the COO of Aquavita East Africa, and he's also a strong advocate for climate change and SDG action. Thank you so much for joining us, Barak. Let's just speak about what we've just seen in the story that we just aired about that ban on single-use plastic bottles here in Kenya. How significant do you take this measure?
Thanks for having me. I think the significance of this measure can only be appreciated when you understand the impact of plastic on our environment and on our ecosystem in general. You have a look at, what has happened over the years with the issues around, global warming and environmental degradation. We cannot, overstate the importance of getting rid of plastic from our environment. So having understood that, I think it's important to state that, that's a really significant step. It's very practical, looking at the fact that we have currently over 700 species of marine life with plastics in their digestive tracts. We currently produce globally more than 7 billion tons of plastic, and this really has a negative impact on the environment. Kenya is signatories to the Paris Accord, where it has got a national determined contribution of reducing carbon emissions by 30%. So this step is significant and is very practical.
Barak, one of the things that we saw this year, we began with environmental crises, including wildfires in various parts of the globe, floods, locust invasions, especially here in East Africa, and we also saw them going through to India. Just speak to us about especially now in the midst of this pandemic, where it seems as though there's so much focus on what's happening with the pandemic. Are we seeing that even through this, we are seeing governments maybe still seeing that the environment is important, that it is something that they still have to put at the forefront of their agenda?
Yeah, I think if we understand that we all exist in an ecosystem with millions and millions of species, and all these species are connected to each other, whether it's plants, whether it's animals, whether it's us as human beings, we are all connected to each other in some way. Now, while our innovations and progress that we have made over the years have certainly been useful, in the process, some of our activities have been detrimental, negatively affecting some of these species. And because of the connectedness that we have, that ends up generating a ripple effect, and that then creates a crisis in the end. And so I think that it's very important to understand and and internalize the latest, I think, challenge that we are dealing with globally, which is how do we reduce the impact of carbon emissions? How do we ensure that we operate in a more sustainable world, in a more how do we make sure that we make the world a much better place for generations to come? So I think it's a really important issue that we need to look at, and we need to appreciate the connectedness that we have, and the fact that all of us exist in this ecosystem, and we need each other.
Barak, let's just speak about what we have seen in various parts of the world with this coronavirus pandemic, and how the lockdowns, the curfews have impacted actually positively when it comes to pollution, that we're seeing a lot less pollution, a lot less pollution because of people not traveling as much as they have been. Just speak to us, because this is kind of a temporary thing, and it's something that has been almost forced on people for them to have this effect that we're seeing. What is going to happen, do you think, going forward? Are we going to maintain some of the positivity that we've seen from this crisis, that going forward we are going to be a lot more cognizant of what we're doing when it comes to the environment?
I think that the gains made are helpful, but I think that they were not intentional. And for that reason, they are not sustainable. And they're not sustainable because, they arise out of economic activity stopping. And we cannot stop, economic activity. I think we've seen most of the countries announcing or stating their intentions to reopen their economies. And so to that extent, what is more important is for all of us to appreciate and recognize that the need to protect our environment, the need to fight against climate change and protect the ecosystems that we live in has now developed into a responsibility that all of us must carry, and we must carry it through to be successful. And so it will be important that, governments, the private sector, and all stakeholders, participate in the implementation of plans such as the National Climate Change Action Plan that was recently launched in Kenya. Actions to do with innovations in renewable energy, actions to do with action against climate change and reducing carbon emissions. These, I think, are what are going to result into tangible results that we need. I mean, simple things like just integrating in our education curriculum and talking to children in our schools and in our homes and creating awareness about environmental protection. I think those deliberate and strategic moves are what are going to be significant in generating progress and reducing our carbon emissions and protecting the world and making it a much better place for generations to come.
Thank you so much for joining us, Barak Oduno, the CEO of Aquavita East Africa. He's also a strong advocate for climate change and SDG action. We're now going to take a short break and return your business news, including Egypt rolls out plans to reopen its economy amid rising COVID-19 cases. And China becomes the leading investor in Tanzania after pumping over $7 billion into the nation's economy.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. It's time now for your business news. Let's turn our attention to Egypt, where the government there is set to reopen the economy in the second half of this month. That's despite the surge in COVID-19 infections. Since mid-March, the North African economy has imposed a night curfew and a partial lockdown. The move is part of precautionary measures to curb the spread of the global health emergency. From Cairo, here's CGTN's Adel El-Mrouhi.
Egypt is starting to open up the country under strict preventive measures. Businesses have been struggling under the pandemic, and they've been lobbying to gradually return to regular operation hours. The government has been responding positively to these requests, Banks increased their working hours this week and are aiming to go back to a full 8 hours working day by the end of this month. The Egyptian cabinet is saying all services and businesses will be allowed to operate. Their work resumption plan, however, will be divided into phases. It is planning to open mosques and churches starting June 20th. Movie theaters, restaurants and cafes will follow. They will all operate at limited capacity though. A few hotels have been allowed to operate, accommodating local visitors. More will follow as the summer vacation season approaches, but all hotels must follow the Tourism Ministry's COVID-19 regulations. With many European and regional countries preparing to resume flights, Egypt's national carrier aims to join. This will allow tourism to pick up. Aviation officials are now recommending that arriving passengers should self-quarantine at home. Officials are expecting the number of COVID-19 infections to go up, but the government says its entire coexisting with the pandemic plan could come to a complete halt or even get reversed if the risks of infections get higher than their current speculations. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, elsewhere, 5 airports in Nigeria are set to resume commercial scheduled flights starting June the 21st. That's according to the country's aviation authority. The regulator says the move is part of measures to ease COVID-19 restrictions. Nigeria closed its airports on March the 13th due to the surge in the numbers of cases. Only emergency and essential flights such as cargo transportation have since been operating. So far, the West African economy has confirmed over 11,000 COVID-19 cases with at least 315 deaths. About 3,329 have recovered from the novel virus as of June the 4th. Kenya's private sector continued to face sharp falls in the levels of activity and demand in May. That's amid the ongoing travel restrictions due to the pandemic. Last month, the market Stanbic Bank Kenya Purchasing Managers Index came in at 36.7. That's higher than April's 34.8, but it's still well below the 50 mark that separates expansion from contraction. During the month under review, output was noted to have declined at a steep pace. That's as companies reduced activity and customers stayed away to slow the spread of the virus. There was also an overall fall in input prices, the sharpest in over 5 years, owing to ongoing efforts to lower spending and salaries. South Africa's mining industry is in talks with the government to allow foreign miners to return to work. Mines in the world's biggest producer of platinum were given the green light to ramp up operations to 100% from the 1st of this month. However, an estimated 45,000 foreign workers are yet to return to work, as CGTN's Angela Coppola now explains.
The first batch of 9,500 mine workers, mainly from Zimbabwe and Mozambique, have been registered for the process by the South African mines that they work for. According to the council, they have obtained special dispensation from the National Department of Health to bring the mine workers back, and that's despite the country's borders still being closed due to the COVID-19 national lockdown measures. The miners will meet at a designated area in each country. They'll be tested there, and if they pass, will be transported through the borders and to those mines that they're going to be working at. Once they get to the mines, they'll be placed in a 14-day quarantine period at the facilities near the mine before they get back to work. The council did confirm that its member mines only have 7,000 quarantine beds at the moment, so no more than 7,000 workers will be traveling in that first phase. The remaining 2,500 workers will need to wait for those quarantine beds to become available. The South African mines have been ramping up production since May 1, and we understand that they will need at least until the end of June to reach near full production. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
China has surpassed its Western peers to become the biggest foreign investor in Tanzania. The relationship between China and Tanzania started in the 1960s when China undertook the construction of projects like the 1860-kilometer-long Tanzania-Zambia Railway Authority in the 1970s and the Urafiki textile mills. China's total investment in Tanzania has exceeded $7 billion. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
2020 marks 56 years of economic and diplomatic relations between Tanzania and China. Evidence of this relationship is not hard to find. The Tanzania-Zambia Railway is the longest in the nation, and its first ever textile factory, Rafiki, were both constructed by the Chinese government back in the early 1970s. Beijing has since assisted with numerous infrastructure and aid projects all over the country. Shuyan Wang came to Tanzania 20 years ago. She says the nature of business between the two countries has changed.
Business investment has become more and more. Besides the construction sector, now more people have come to factory, manufacturing and trading, and even financial institutions have come to Tanzania right now.
Data from the Tanzania Investment Center shows that in 2014 alone, the country accounted for 16.3% of China's foreign direct investment to Africa, making it one of the major recipients of China's aid to the continent. It has received more than 100 cooperative projects and programs worth over $2 billion since the early 1960s.
Now, speaking of China becoming a superpower, when you become a superpower, you tend to turn into a donor nation. So China is now a donor nation. We get support from China financially. So apart from economic ties, then financial support which is coming in terms of donation.
China is also the largest project contractor in Tanzania, with investments ranging from infrastructure, mining and agriculture, to manufacturing, hotels, real estate and banks. The long history between the two countries positions Tanzania as one of China's favorite trading partners.
The history of trade between Tanzania and China extends beyond 5 decades, and it seems it is still going strong. According to Tanzania's Ministry of Trade and Industry, China has been Tanzania's largest trade partner for the last 3 consecutive years. Trade volumes between Tanzania and China last year alone stood at $4 billion.
According to the Tanzania Investment Center, over 200 Chinese companies have investments in Tanzania. The number is expected to grow. It is hoped that the relationship between Tanzania and China can continue to bring mutual benefit for its people. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
We'll move to northern Nigeria now, where one woman is breaking the norm in the male-dominated coffin-making trade. Data from Nigeria's National Bureau of Statistics shows that there are more unemployed women than men in the West African nation. Many women there now are venturing into fields they previously steered clear of. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam tells us more.
Famous female coffin maker Loveth Ugochukwu putting work into her craft. As a trained seamstress, nothing prepared the mother of 6 for the journey into her newfound trade. But Loveth lost everything during the sectarian violence that rocked north-central Plateau State in 2001. So her quest for survival put her on a path to a male-only craft.
I did not choose to do the work, but after the crisis, we left with nothing. So I have to do the work anyhow, at least to look for survival, to at least to put food on my table, to take care of my children, and to do other things. When some men come here, they will say, wow, a woman doing caskets, even them as a man, they are not free entering the place. Surprise to them, seeing a woman doing the work. Even some will park with their car, looking, is it really a woman?
After her decade-long apprenticeship, Loveth Ugochukwu launched her business with a capital of about $800. Now she rakes in about $100 to $600 per casket, and she makes 2 or 3 caskets a day. Despite being successful at her trade, Loveth still meets subtle gender discrimination.
It's a lot of challenge. Being that I'm a woman, you know, sometimes you go to the Katako, buy the wood, you know, tell them what to do. They will say, you know, they will keep on questioning you. Why do you want it like this? Because maybe they say I'm a woman. But I thank God at least I can be able to overcome it.
Nearly half of Nigeria's 200 million strong population are females. A huge number of them are affected by the unemployment crisis. But Loveth is changing that narrative. With 8 employees on her payroll, she's looking to expand her business further and train more women to become self-reliant. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN, Plateau, Nigeria.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break. In return, here's what you can expect. Uganda to introduce strict regulations for motorcycles to curb high accident rates.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Uganda has begun introducing strict regulations for the motorcycle industry, commonly called boda bodas. Authorities are pushing to reduce congestion and curbing the high number of accidents. Key among the plans is to digitalize the industry and have all motorcycle taxi operators join a ride-hailing app to govern the industry. But the new rules may phase out hundreds of young people employed in the sector. CGTN's Isabel Nakira brings us the details.
Uganda is kickstarting ride-hailing for motorcycle taxis. To operate within the city centre, all boda riders will have to use the technology. City authorities say they are trying to bring order to traffic management. They hope that by regulating bodas, roads will become safer.
We are going to ask all of them under that law to register all the online bodas association. Will give a grace period for you to register with the ministry, but also for those who are not yet registered online, because now you will most of your activities will be online. We will support you to register online. We will train you.
There are already ride-hailing platforms used in Uganda like SafeBoda, Bolt and Uber, but not many boda riders are using the service. Many say the new rules are too tough and will limit their ability to make money. Only around 16% of Ugandans are estimated to use the internet.
Some of us never went to school. Now when you bring online technology, then you're making life really hard for some of us.
The Kampala City Authority says the boda industry needs regulation to cut down on the confusion and chaos associated with the sector. The boda industry in Uganda employs thousands of young people, but the growing number of the motorcycles is causing concern to authorities. The City Council says it's creating boda free zones and parking spaces to reduce congestion. But the riders fear they will lose business.
The only worry is that they might cut down on the number of bodas. I only ask that they shouldn't reduce the number of drivers.
The motorcycle taxi is one of the fastest and easiest ways to get around the heavy traffic in Kampala. And with the new digital system, the government says it will be able to closely monitor their services. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
In sports news after the break, here's what's coming up. Veteran South African midfielder Dean Furman bids farewell to domestic football.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We begin our sport news in South Africa, where Dean Furman has parted ways with his club SuperSport United in order to be closer to his family in the UK, where he's also expecting the arrival of his first child. Speaking to CGT and CS du Plessis from Manchester, Furman said he had fond memories of his time in the Rainbow Nation.
The Cape Town-born midfielder bids farewell to South African domestic football with a proud record that has seen him amass just under 200 appearances, claim 4 domestic cup titles and reach the final of the 2017 CAF Confederation Cup, while accumulating a milestone of 50 caps for the national team, as well as captaining both club and country in the process.
To have lived and played in South Africa for 5 years, both on and off the pitch, it was absolutely an incredible experience. On the pitch, winning trophies, traveling the continent with SuperSport, really immersing myself into a different dressing room with different people from different backgrounds. Getting to know my teammates and my coaches was very, very special.
I mean, I know that you're not done with Bafana, and you still remain a great ambassador for football over there. What are your where are you looking to land going forward now? Where are you targeting, and where would you like to be playing football?
The aim was certainly to be closer to the family with the birth on the way of my child. So that's certainly still the thinking, and I guess we're just going to have to play a bit of a patient game at the moment and wait for things to unravel and see what the fallout is in the coming weeks and months.
But you are still available for the national team, and you would like to add yet another Africa Cup of Nations, I'm sure, to your belt. You've got quite a few under your belt now.
Yeah, I would love to get to number 4. I mean, for me, it'd be very interesting to see what happens with AFCON. I know that's meant to be in January, so it'd be very interesting to see if that can go ahead. Certainly, once we find the club here, or my next club, wherever that may be, then I will have a conversation with the coach of that club and Coach Molefe and see if we can hopefully find a solution that's suitable for everyone.
Whether Furman plays in Europe or in the UK, he remains a valuable asset to South Africa's national team. And Coach Molefe Nseki will do everything in his power to keep the 51-cap veteran in his squad. Furman's experience, his work rate and ability to read a game will be heavily relied upon, especially when Bafana head to the next AFCON, aiming to go further than the quarterfinals a year ago. CS du Plessis, CGTN, Johannesburg.
Retired Kenyan athletes who have been hit by the coronavirus pandemic are set to benefit from a food relief program, which is to be launched on Wednesday. The initiative was started with a seed capital of over $4,700 by the National Olympics Committee of Kenya. Athletes who retired by 2004 and have competed for Kenya in the Olympics, Commonwealth Games and African Championships will be the first beneficiaries.
We are just looking at the most vulnerable who currently have not been touched or reached by any form of support. Our vetting system will be through a committee composed of the 3 umbrella bodies, but the first initial place will be our member federations. For sports people, there have been those who have been lucky to be extremely successful through their sports, through their careers, and they are doing well at the moment. Just the same way we have those who are needy.
Japan is preparing for the reality of next year's postponed